I never believed in the "don't look out your window at night" rule until last Tuesday. I was home alone around 2:17 a.m. scrolling on my phone when I got a notification from a number I didn't recognize. It just said, "I can see you." I laughed, probably a prank. Then my bedroom blinds shifted, just slightly, like something outside had brushed against them. I told myself it was the wind and tried to go back to sleep. That's when the second message came in. "No, don't look away from the window." My stomach dropped. I slowly sat up, staring at the window across my room. My house is on the second floor, so there shouldn't be anyone out there. Still, I got out of bed and crept closer. My reflection stared back at me in the glass. At least I thought it was my reflection, because it smiled before I did. And then it tapped from the other side. 3 knocks from inside the glass. My phone buzzed again. "Good. Now you can see me clearly." I backed away, but the reflection didn't. It stayed right there, still smiling, still waiting. And then it pressed its hand to the glass, except the hand didn't match mine anymore. Too long, too thin, and it started pushing through. The last message I ever got was, "We switch places when you blink." I haven't blinked since, but I can feel my eyes burning, and I swear I can hear it practicing my voice on the other side of the glass. This happened when I was 16. My parents had gone out of town for the weekend, so I was staying alone in our old farmhouse. The house was over 100 years old, and everyone in town had stories about it. The first night was normal. The second night wasn't. Around 2:13 a.m., I woke up to the sound of footsteps in the hallway. At first, I thought someone had broken in. The footsteps were slow. One step, then another, then another. I grabbed my phone and listened. The steps stopped right outside my bedroom door. Silence. Then 3 knocks. Knock, knock, knock. I called out, "Who's there?" Nothing. I opened the door and checked the hallway. No one. Every door was locked. I told myself it was just the house settling and went back to bed. A few minutes later, my phone rang. No caller ID. I answered. For several seconds, there was only static. Then a man's voice whispered, "Joseph." My blood ran cold. I hadn't said my name to anyone. I asked who it was. The voice replied, "Don't open the basement door." Then the call ended. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next morning, I checked my phone's call history. There was no record of the call. None. When my parents came home, I finally told them what happened. My mother turned pale. She told me that years before we bought the house, an elderly man had lived there alone. One winter, he died in the basement after falling down the stairs, the part that still terrifies me. When she showed me an old photograph of him, I recognized his face immediately. It was the same voice I'd heard on the phone, and according to the date on the photograph, he had been dead for over 20 years. It happened 3 years ago, and I still check every lock in my house twice before bed. I was home alone one Friday night. Around 11:30 p.m., I heard someone knock on my front door. 3 slow knocks. I looked through the peephole. Nobody was there. I figured it was some kids messing around and went back to watching TV. 10 minutes later, I heard the same 3 knocks. This time, I checked my security camera. The front porch was empty. That's when my phone buzzed. The motion detector in my backyard had been triggered. My stomach dropped. I pulled up the backyard camera and nearly screamed. A man was standing at my back door, just staring inside. I immediately called 911. While I was talking to the dispatcher, I heard something that made my blood run cold. 3 knocks, not on the front door, not on the back door, on my bedroom door upstairs. I lived alone. The dispatcher told me to get out immediately. I ran through the kitchen and out the garage door. Police arrived minutes later and searched the house. They found muddy footprints leading from an unlocked basement window all the way to my bedroom. But they never found the man. To this day, I don't know how long he was inside my house, or why he waited until I was on the phone with 911 to let me know he was there. A woman was home alone when she received a text from an unknown number. "Lock your doors." She ignored it. A minute later, another message arrived. "I'm serious," she replied, asking who it was. No answer. Then she received a picture. It was her house, taken from outside. Right then, panicking, she called police. While waiting, another message arrived. "He's in your backyard." Officers searched the property and found a man hiding behind her shed. They never identified who sent the warnings. The number was disconnected the next day. To this day, she has no idea who saved her life. A family kept hearing footsteps in their attic. They assumed it was squirrels. For weeks, the noises continued. Then food started disappearing. One evening, the father climbed into the attic to investigate. At first, he found nothing. Then he noticed blankets, water bottles, fast food wrappers. Someone had been living up there. As he backed toward the ladder, he heard movement behind him. A man emerged from the darkness and ran past him. Police later discovered the intruder had been living above the family for nearly a month, watching them through a vent every single day. It was exactly 3:04 a.m. when my doorbell camera sent a notification. I almost ignored it. Nobody should be at my front door that late. But when I opened the app, I saw a man standing completely still on my porch. He wasn't knocking. He wasn't ringing the bell. He was just staring directly into the camera. I watched for almost 30 seconds before realizing something even stranger. He never blinked. My heart started racing. I checked the live feed again. He was still there. Then my phone buzzed. The motion detector had picked up movement in my backyard. I switched cameras. The backyard camera showed another man standing near my back door. That's when I realized the person on the porch wasn't trying to get in. He was distracting me. I immediately called 911. As I spoke to the dispatcher, both men slowly walked away. Police searched the area but couldn't find them. The next morning, officers reviewed my footage. One of them asked me a question that made my stomach drop. "Did you invite anyone over last night?" I said no. He pointed at the screen. The man on my porch wasn't looking at the camera. He was looking through the window directly behind it, at me. For weeks, food kept disappearing from my kitchen. Nothing major, just little things. A granola bar, a bottle of water, half a loaf of bread. I lived alone, so it didn't make any sense. Then I started hearing noises at night, tiny footsteps above my bedroom ceiling. I convinced myself it was the house settling. One afternoon, I came home early from work. As soon as I walked inside, I heard something move upstairs. I froze. Nobody should have been there. I grabbed my phone and quietly checked every room. Nothing. Then I noticed the crawl space door in the hallway was slightly open. I was positive I had closed it before leaving. I pulled it open and shined my flashlight inside. At first, I saw nothing. Then the beam landed on a sleeping bag. a backpack, empty food wrappers, and a photograph of me sleeping in my bed. The police later discovered someone had been living in the crawl space for nearly 2 months. They had been coming out every night after I fell asleep. I moved out the next day. To this day, I still don't know how long they had been watching me before I found them. Last summer, I rented an Airbnb while traveling for work. The listing said the entire house would be mine. The first night was normal, but around 2 a.m., I woke up to footsteps upstairs. I assumed it was the neighbors. The next morning, I noticed something strange. A coffee mug was sitting on the kitchen counter. I hadn't used any dishes. I washed it and forgot about it. The second night, the footsteps came back. This time they sounded like they were directly above me. Back and forth, back and forth. I messaged the host. They told me there wasn't an upstairs. According to the floor plan, the second floor had been sealed off years ago. That answer didn't make me feel any better. Before bed, I placed a chair in front of the staircase door. At 3:04 a.m., I woke up again. The chair was lying on its side, the staircase door was open, and muddy footprints led into the darkness above. I grabbed my keys and left immediately. The next day, police searched the property. They found a man living in a hidden section of the attic. He had been entering the house through an exterior access panel. The officer later told me something I wish I never heard. The man admitted he'd been watching guests sleep, and he'd been doing it for years. It started with small things, a TV remote that wasn't where I left it, a kitchen chair pulled out from the table, cabinet doors left open. I blamed myself. Maybe I was tired, maybe I was forgetting things. Then one morning, I found a family photo turned face down on the shelf. I lived alone. There was nobody else who could have touched it. The next week, things got worse. My shoes would be in different rooms. Lights I'd turned off would be on when I got home. One night, I decided to set up my phone to record the living room while I slept. The next morning, I watched the footage. For 6 hours, nothing happened. Then, at 3:17 a.m., a shadow crossed the room. Someone walked past the camera, slowly, quietly, like they knew exactly where it was. I called the police immediately. They searched the house and eventually found a small, hidden door behind a storage shelf in my basement. The space behind it was barely big enough for a person. Inside were food wrappers, blankets, and empty water bottles. Someone had been living inside my house, and according to the officer, judging by the amount of trash, they'd been there for months. 3 years ago, I was working from home late at night. Around midnight, I noticed the tiny green light beside my webcam was on. The weird thing was, I wasn't using any apps that needed my camera. I opened my laptop settings and turned the camera off. A few minutes later, the light came back on. I restarted my computer, but the moment it turned back on, the webcam light was glowing again. That's when I checked my email. I had received a message from an address I'd never seen before. There was no subject line, just one sentence. I like the blue lamp behind you. I froze. There was a blue lamp sitting on a table directly behind my desk. No one should have known that. I immediately covered the webcam with tape and unplugged my computer. The next morning, I took it to a repair shop. The technician found remote access software hidden deep in the system. Someone had been logging into my laptop for weeks. But that's not the part that still bothers me. Before I left the shop, the technician asked me one question. Do you live alone? When I said yes, he looked confused. "That's strange," he said, "because whoever was watching you took screenshots, and in a few of them there appears to be someone standing behind your chair." Last year, I got a voicemail from my own phone number. At first, I thought it was a glitch, but when I pressed play, I heard my own voice. I was whispering, "Joseph, don't leave the house tomorrow." I laughed and deleted it. The next day, I was getting ready for work when I remembered the message. It was creepy, sure, but I wasn't about to listen to some random voicemail. As I grabbed my keys, my phone rang again. My own number. This time, I answered. For a few seconds, there was only static. Then I heard myself breathing, and then my voice. "You're not listening." I hung up. Now I was genuinely freaked out. I blocked my own number and went to work. That afternoon, a pickup truck ran a red light at an intersection I normally drove through every day. The crash killed 2 people. I would have been there at that exact time if I hadn't stopped for coffee after that weird phone call. That night, my phone rang again. Blocked number. I answered. My voice sounded terrified. "Lock your bedroom door." Then the call ended. I checked every room in the house. Nothing. No signs of anyone. Still, I locked my bedroom door. Around 3 a.m., I woke up to the sound of footsteps. Slow, heavy, moving through my hallway. I grabbed my phone and listened. The footsteps stopped outside my bedroom. Then someone tried the doorknob. Once, twice, 3 times. Whoever it was stood there for nearly a minute, then walked away. The next morning, my back door was open. The police found muddy footprints inside the house. Someone had definitely been there. After that, I stopped ignoring the calls. Every few weeks, my future self would warn me about something. A blown tire, a house fire down the street, a violent storm. Every warning came true for almost a year. Then, last night, my phone rang again. My own number. I answered immediately. My future self was crying. I had never heard myself sound that scared. He said only 4 words. "Do not answer this." Then the call disconnected. A second later, my phone started ringing. Caller ID. My own number. When I was 16, my parents left town for the weekend and trusted me to watch the house. The only rule they gave me was simple: don't go into the basement. That wasn't unusual. The basement was unfinished and full of old boxes. The door stayed locked and nobody ever went down there. The first night was normal. The second night, around 1:13 a.m., I heard a loud bang from below the floor. I froze. A few seconds later, another bang echoed through the house. It was coming from the basement. I grabbed my phone and texted my dad. "Something's making noise in the basement." A minute later, he replied, "Probably pipes. Ignore it." But then I heard something that made my stomach drop. 3 slow knocks. Knock, knock, knock. Not pipes. Someone was knocking from the other side of the basement door. I backed away and called my dad. No answer. The knocking stopped. For almost an hour the house was silent. Then my phone buzzed. A text from my dad. "Whatever you do, do not unlock that door." I stared at the message. Before I could reply, another text arrived. "I'm serious." Then another. "Leave the house." My heart started racing. I grabbed my keys and headed for the front door. As I reached it, I heard a metallic click behind me. The basement door had unlocked itself. Slowly, the door began to open. I ran outside and jumped into my car. From the driveway, I looked back at the house. A figure was standing in the basement doorway, just watching. Police arrived 10 minutes later. They searched the entire house. The basement was empty. No person. No signs of forced entry. Nothing. But one officer found something strange. Deep in the basement was a second door hidden behind shelves. The lock had been broken from the inside. Nobody knows who opened it, or what had been living down there. My parents sold the house 3 months later, and to this day, my dad refuses to tell me what was behind that second door. I came home from work and found a package on my porch. The strange thing was that I hadn't ordered anything. My name and address were printed perfectly on the label. No return address, no company logo, just a plain brown box. I brought it inside and opened it. Inside was a stack of photographs. Every single photo was of me, walking into work, leaving the grocery store, pumping gas, standing in my own driveway. My stomach dropped. The newest photo had been taken that morning. I called the police, but there wasn't much they could do. The photos weren't threatening, just creepy. I installed cameras around my house that night. For a week, nothing happened. Then another package arrived. This one contained only a single photograph. It showed me sleeping in my bedroom, taken from inside my house. I nearly threw up. The police searched the home. No signs of entry, no hidden cameras, nothing. They advised me to stay somewhere else for a few days, so I stayed with my brother. 3 days later, another package was delivered. This time, it was sent to my brother's address. Inside was another photo. It showed me sitting on my brother's couch the night before. Someone had followed me there. The back of the photograph had a handwritten message: "You moved too soon." The police launched a larger investigation. They reviewed traffic cameras and security footage from around my neighborhood. A week later, they found the suspect. It wasn't a stranger. It was the delivery driver who worked my route. For nearly a year, he had photographed people whose houses he delivered to. Most never knew. But when detectives searched his apartment, they discovered thousands of photos, entire walls covered with pictures, schedules, addresses, daily routines. Mine filled an entire room. But the worst part wasn't the photographs. They found a notebook beside them. On the final page was my address. Next to it were 3 words: "Ready to enter." If you enjoyed this story and want more, feel free to press the follow button. Thanks for watching. I was home alone one Friday night when my phone died. No big deal. I plugged it into the charger in my bedroom and went downstairs to watch TV. About 30 minutes later, I heard my ringtone. I figured it had enough battery to turn back on, so I ignored it. Then it rang again and again. Annoyed, I went upstairs to see who kept calling. The screen showed no missed calls. Nothing. I shrugged it off and headed back downstairs. 5 minutes later, the ringtone started again. This time it sounded different, muffled, like it wasn't coming from my bedroom. I followed the sound down the hallway and stopped outside the guest room. The ringtone was definitely inside. The guest room was supposed to be empty. I slowly opened the door. The room was dark. The ringing stopped. I turned on the light. Nothing. No phone. No person. Just an empty room. Then my own phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from an unknown number. Wrong room. My stomach dropped. I immediately checked every door and window. All locked. I called the police anyway. While waiting, I sat in the living room staring at the front door. Then another text arrived. Still getting warmer. The officers searched the entire house. Nothing. No signs of entry. No one inside. They told me it was probably a prank. After they left, I convinced myself they were right, until I got ready for bed. As I pulled back the blanket, I noticed something under my pillow. A phone. An old flip phone. Not mine. The battery was nearly dead. There was only one saved contact. It was labeled me. Before I could react, the phone rang. The caller ID simply said, "Under the house." Then I heard someone knock from beneath the floorboards. When Emily went to bed, her bedroom door opened normally. At 3:11 a.m., she woke up needing water. She reached for the handle. It wouldn't move. The door was locked. The problem? The lock was on the outside. She called for her husband. No answer. She called again. Silence. Then she heard footsteps in the hallway. Slow, heavy, stopping right outside the door. A voice whispered, "Go back to sleep." It wasn't her husband. She grabbed her phone and called 911. The dispatcher stayed on the line until officers arrived. When they searched the house, they found her husband asleep on the couch, but they also found muddy footprints leading from a broken basement window. Someone had been inside the house, and someone had locked her in. Would you have opened that door? Follow Midnight Files for your daily dose of nightmares. Jake lived alone. One night, his phone displayed AirPods connected. He didn't own AirPods. He disconnected them. A minute later, they connected again. Curious, he opened Find My. The signal was inside his apartment, not outside. Inside, he searched every room. Nothing. Then he checked the storage closet he never used. The door wouldn't open all the way. Something was blocking it. When he pushed harder, a suitcase slid forward. Behind it was a small gap, big enough for a person. Inside were blankets, water bottles, and a pair of AirPods. Someone had been living inside his closet. The police never found out who. Would you check every closet in your house tonight? Follow Midnight Files for more. Every night, at exactly midnight, a tiny red light appeared in his neighbor's upstairs window. It stayed on until sunrise. For weeks, he ignored it. Then one night, he walked outside. The light moved. It followed him. He stepped left. It moved left. He stepped right. It moved right. The next day he bought binoculars. Looking through them, he realized it wasn't a light. It was the recording indicator on a camera, pointed directly at his house. He called police. When officers searched the property, they found dozens of hard drives, hundreds of hours of footage. Most of it was his family. The neighbor was arrested, but investigators never figured out why he spent years recording them. What's the creepiest thing a neighbor has ever done? Follow Midnight Files for tomorrow's case file. Tonight's file comes from a man who started noticing the same thing every night. At exactly 2:13 a.m., a man would appear across the street. He never walked around. He never used his phone. He just stood there. The first night, he thought nothing of it. The second night, the man was back. The third night, he was standing in the exact same spot. So he decided to record him. At 2:13 a.m., he opened his blinds and pointed his phone outside. The street was empty. Confused, he checked the recording. The man was there, standing under the streetlight, looking directly at his house. His stomach dropped. He ran back to the window. The street was still empty. Then he noticed something else. In the video, the man slowly raised one arm and pointed directly at the bedroom window, the same window he was standing behind. The police never identified the man, and according to the homeowner, he still appears every night at 2:13 a.m. Follow Midnight Files for more case files like this. This is Midnight File number 024. A woman kept replacing the bulb on her front porch. Every morning, the light was off. At first, she blamed the wiring. Then she blamed the weather. But one night, She stayed awake to find out. At 1:47 a.m., the lights suddenly went dark. She immediately checked the security camera. What she saw made her freeze. A man had walked into her yard. He wasn't wearing a mask. He wasn't trying to hide. He simply reached up, unscrewed the bulb, and walked away. The next night, he came back. Again, he removed the bulb. The night after that, he returned a third time. This time he looked directly into the camera. Then he smiled. Police searched the area but never found him. A week later, she moved out. The new owners installed a camera too, and according to them, someone still removes the porch light every few nights. Follow Midnight Files for more case files like this. Tonight's file comes from a security camera recording that was never explained. A homeowner received a motion alert at 3:02 a.m. He checked the live feed. Nothing. The yard was empty. Assuming it was a bug, he went back to sleep. The next morning, another alert appeared, so he reviewed the footage. At first he didn't see anything. Then he paused the video. Standing at the edge of the driveway was a person, completely motionless. The figure remained there for over 3 hours, never moving, never leaving, just staring toward the house. The camera finally switched to night mode. For a split second, the person's face became visible. The homeowner zoomed in. His blood ran cold. The face looked exactly like him. Police checked the property but found no footprints, no evidence, and no explanation. The footage was later deleted during a software update, but according to the homeowner, he still gets motion alerts from that same spot every few weeks. Follow Midnight Files for more case files like this. This is Midnight File number 26. A man noticed someone standing across the street from his house every night at exactly 2:14 a.m. The figure never moved, never looked away, just stood there. For 2 weeks, he watched from his bedroom window every night, same spot, same time. The police couldn't do anything because the person was standing on public property. So he installed a security camera facing the street. The next morning, he checked the footage. The figure was there, but something felt wrong. The person wasn't blinking, wasn't shifting their weight, wasn't moving at all. The man bought a second camera and pointed it from a different angle. The next night, both cameras recorded. At 2:14 a.m., the figure appeared on camera 1, but on camera 2, the street was empty. The figure only existed on one camera. The homeowner moved out 3 weeks later. The camera still records the figure every night. Follow Midnight Files for more case files like this. This is Midnight File number 27. A woman was brushing her teeth when she noticed something strange in the bathroom mirror. Someone was standing behind her. She spun around. Nobody. She looked back at the mirror. Nothing. She laughed it off. The next night, it happened again. A dark figure standing just over her shoulder. Again, nobody was there. For weeks, it kept appearing, always in reflections, mirrors, windows, TV screens. One night she decided to take a photo. The figure appeared in the reflection, but there was something she hadn't noticed before. The figure wasn't standing behind her. It was standing beside her, looking directly at her. When she checked the reflection again, the figure was closer than before. She never took another picture. Follow Midnight Files for more case files like this. This is Midnight File number 28. Every night at exactly 3:11 a.m., a man's phone buzzed with the same notification, motion detected. He checked the footage. Nothing. Empty driveway, empty porch. Nothing moved. For 10 nights, the alert continued. Always 3:11 a.m., always nothing. On the 11th night, he stayed awake. At 3:11 a.m., the notification arrived. He opened the live feed immediately. The driveway was empty. Then he noticed something, a shadow moving across the camera. Not outside, across the lens itself, as if someone was standing inches from the camera, watching the house. The footage froze. The next morning, he found muddy footprints beneath the camera. They led toward his front door, but none led away. Follow Midnight Files for more case files like this. Midnight File number 049. The wrong apartment. Tonight's file comes from a college student who thought someone had made a mistake. At 11:48 p.m., somebody knocked on her apartment door. When she looked through the peephole, a man she didn't recognize was standing there. "Sarah?" he asked. She didn't answer. Eventually, he left. The next night, he came back. "Sarah, I know you're in there." She called apartment security. They searched the building but couldn't find him. A week later, she returned home and found a note taped to her door. It read, "Wrong apartment." Relieved, she thought the confusion was over. Then she turned the note over. On the back was a photograph, a picture of her sleeping in her bedroom. Follow Midnight Files for more case files like this. Midnight File number 050. The house across the street. Tonight's file comes from a teenager who spent most of his summer staring out the window. After breaking his ankle, there wasn't much else to do. Every day, he watched the neighborhood, the mailman, the joggers, the families walking their dogs, and the man who lived across the street. At first, nothing seemed unusual, but one night, around 11 p.m., he noticed the man dragging a large black trash bag from his garage. It looked heavy. The man struggled to lift it into the trunk of his car. The next morning, another bag appeared, then another, then another. Every few days, a new black bag, always late at night, always loaded into the trunk. The teenager started recording everything. His friends thought he was obsessed. His parents told him to stop spying on people, but then he saw something that made his stomach drop. One evening, a woman walked into the man's house. She never came back out. He watched the front door for hours. Nothing. The next day, her car was still parked outside, but she was gone. The teenager called the police. Officers checked the house. The man calmly explained that the woman was his sister and had left through the back door. The police left. Nobody believed him. That night, he couldn't sleep. At 2:13 a.m., he looked out his window. The man was standing outside, not at his own house, at the edge of the teenager's driveway, staring directly at his bedroom window. The next morning, there was a note taped to the glass. It read, "Stop watching me." But underneath those words was something worse. A photograph, a picture of him standing at his window the night before, taken from inside his own bedroom. Follow Midnight Files for more case files like this. Midnight File number 047. The neighbor across the street. Tonight's file comes from a man who thought his neighbor was just lonely. Every evening around the same time, he would look out his living room window and see the older man across the street standing on his porch. At first, it seemed normal, but then he noticed something strange. The man wasn't looking at the street. He was looking directly at his house, every night, for weeks. One evening, he decided to wave. The neighbor didn't wave back. He just stared. A few days later, he got home from work and found a note tucked under his front door. It read, You weren't home at 2:14 p.m. There was no name, no explanation, just that sentence. The next morning, he installed a camera facing the street. That night, the camera captured the neighbor standing on his own porch again. But at exactly 3:07 a.m., the man walked across the street. He stopped at the front door, stared at it for nearly a minute, then slipped something underneath before walking away. The note read, "Your bedroom light stayed on later than usual." The homeowner called the police. When officers questioned the neighbor, they discovered dozens of notebooks inside his house, each one filled with observations: when people left, when they returned, what lights they turned on, what rooms they used, entire years of records about the families on the street. No one ever found out why he was keeping them, and after he was taken away, residents noticed something even stranger. The notebooks didn't just contain observations about the past. Some entries described things that hadn't happened yet. Tonight's second file comes from a new father who thought his baby monitor was malfunctioning. At 2:41 a.m., he woke up to a man's voice coming through the monitor. At first, he thought it was the TV. Then he heard it again. "He's asleep." He rushed into the nursery. His son was sleeping peacefully. No one was there. The next night, it happened again. Not tonight. He checked every room in the house. Nothing. The monitor company insisted nobody could access the device remotely, but the voice kept returning. After a week, he replaced the monitor. The voice stopped. Months later, while moving out, he found a small crawl space hidden behind the nursery closet. Inside was an old folding chair, empty food wrappers, and a blanket. Someone had been living inside the walls of the house. The monitor wasn't picking up a hacker. It was picking up a person. Tonight's final file comes from a woman who rented an Airbnb for one night during a business trip. The listing had hundreds of positive reviews. The host seemed friendly. Everything looked normal. At 1:13 a.m., she received a text from the host. "Don't open the bedroom closet." Confused, she replied, asking why. No response. A few minutes later, another message arrived. "I'm serious. Do not open it." Now she couldn't stop thinking about it. At 2 a.m., curiosity won. She opened the closet. Inside was nothing but a stack of old blankets. Relieved, she went back to bed. The next morning, she mentioned it to the host. His face immediately went pale. He pulled out his phone. The messages weren't from him. His phone had been dead all night. Before she checked out, they reviewed the property's security footage. At 1:12 a.m., someone walked onto the porch, a man neither of them recognized. He stood outside her bedroom window for nearly 20 minutes, then left. No one ever identified him. Follow Midnight Files for more case files like this. Tonight's file comes from a father who woke up at 2:14 a.m. to hear his baby crying. The sound was coming through the baby monitor. Half asleep, he grabbed the monitor screen and looked into the nursery. His daughter was standing in her crib, but she wasn't crying. She was asleep. The crying was still coming through the speaker. Then he noticed something else. Someone was standing beside the crib, a tall figure, completely still, staring down at his daughter. He sprinted upstairs. The nursery door flew open. The room was empty. No figure, no noise. His daughter was still asleep. Shaken, he checked the monitor again. The figure was gone, but on the screen, a single line of text appeared. "You should have stayed downstairs." The monitor shut off. The next morning, he threw it away. That night, the crying started again from the empty nursery. Follow midnight files for more case files that should have stayed closed. At 2:13 a.m., my security camera sent an alert. Someone was standing in my backyard, staring directly into my kitchen window. I checked the live feed and froze. It was my neighbor, the same neighbor who always waved when I left for work. He wasn't moving, just staring. I locked the doors and called the police, but by the time they arrived, he was gone. The next morning, I found muddy footprints beneath my bedroom window. That's when I noticed something else, a small envelope taped to my back door. Inside was a single photograph. It was a picture of me sleeping in my bed. Written on the back were 4 words: "Tonight, I'll come inside." The police searched his house that afternoon. They found dozens of photos. Every single one was of me. And the most recent photo, it had been taken less than an hour before I found the envelope. Follow Midnight Files for more case files that should have stayed closed. Tonight's file comes from a man who lived alone on the 3rd floor. Every night at exactly 2:13 a.m., someone would knock 3 times on his apartment door. He never answered. The knocks continued for a week. Finally, he checked the hallway security camera. No one was there. The next night, the knocks returned. 3 slow knocks. He opened the camera app before checking the door. That's when he noticed something. The hallway was empty, because the knocking was coming from inside his apartment. Follow Midnight Files for more case files like this. What would you have done? If someone knocks on your bedroom window at exactly 3:13 a.m., don't answer. I woke up to 3 slow taps. Not on my door, on my 2nd floor bedroom window. I pulled the curtain back. No one was there. Then my phone buzzed. It was a security alert. Motion detected. Inside your hallway. I never checked what was in the house. I grabbed my keys and ran. The police found every window locked, but my bedroom window was open. Follow Midnight Files before the next case finds you. Midnight File number 27. Tonight's file comes from a man who installed cameras after hearing footsteps outside his apartment every night. The hallway camera never showed anyone. Night after night, nothing. Then, at exactly 3:11 a.m., his phone alerted him to movement. He opened the recording. The hallway was completely empty. He was about to close the app when a voice whispered through the camera's microphone. "He's looking at the screen." He froze. Another whisper came a second later. "Don't move. He'll see you." He slowly lowered his phone. Someone knocked 3 times on his apartment door. When he looked through the peephole, the hallway was empty. The next morning, he replayed the footage. The whispers were gone. Only one sound remained. 3 knocks. Coming from inside his apartment. Follow Midnight Files if you're brave enough for tomorrow's case. Tonight's file comes from a young couple who had just moved into an old farmhouse. At 2:41 every morning, the baby monitor would crackle to life. At first, it was only static. Then, one night, a man's voice whispered, "He's finally asleep." The father grabbed a flashlight and searched every room. Nothing. The doors were locked. The windows were shut. The next morning they assumed someone had hacked the monitor, until they checked the recording. The whisper hadn't come from the baby's room. It came from directly behind the monitor, only inches away. They threw the monitor away that afternoon. At 2:41 the next morning, The same voice came from the empty nursery. You forgot me. Follow Midnight Files for tomorrow night's case. My dad called me at 11:43 p.m. and asked why I was at his house. The problem was, I was in my apartment 40 minutes away. I laughed and told him he had the wrong person. He didn't laugh back. Dad, what are you talking about? He said his security camera sent a motion alert. The footage showed someone walking up to his front door. The person used a key, then walked inside. My dad immediately checked the camera. The person looked exactly like me. Same height, same build, same hoodie. I told him it wasn't me. He thought I was joking until I sent him a photo of me sitting on my couch. Then he got quiet. A few seconds later, he said, "Stay on the phone." I heard him walking through the house, opening doors, checking rooms. Then I heard him stop. "Dad?" No answer. "Dad?" he whispered. "The spare key is gone." The call disconnected. Police searched the house. Nobody was there, but they found muddy footprints leading to the attic. The only thing left behind was a photograph. It was a picture of me leaving work that morning, taken from across the street. I've never asked my dad what happened in that attic. When I moved into my apartment, there was something strange about the front door. It had two deadbolts. The landlord told me only the bottom one worked. The top lock didn't have a key anymore and hadn't been used in years. I never thought about it again. 3 months later, I woke up at 3:12 a.m. to a metallic click. I sat up in bed. Another click. It sounded like a lock turning. My apartment was silent after that. The next morning, I checked the door. The top deadbolt, the one that supposedly didn't work, was locked. I unlocked it from the inside and went to work. That night, it happened again. Click, click. I rushed to the door. The top deadbolt was turning by itself, slowly, like someone was using a key from the other side. I yanked the door open. Nobody was there. No footsteps, no elevator sounds, nothing. The next day, I called the landlord. He went completely pale when I mentioned the second lock. Then he told me something he should have mentioned before I signed the lease. Years ago, the apartment had been split into 2 units. Before the renovation, there was another entrance hidden behind the wall of my bedroom closet. The second deadbolt wasn't connected to my door anymore. It connected to that sealed entrance. That night, I emptied my closet. Behind a stack of old drywall panels was a narrow gap, just wide enough to see through. On the other side was another room, and someone was standing in it, waiting, holding a key. My daughter was 2 years old when it happened. Around midnight, I heard her baby monitor crackle to life. At first, I thought she was talking in her sleep. Then I heard a man's voice, soft, calm, almost whispering. "Don't worry, I'm right here." I bolted upright. My daughter and I were alone in the house. I grabbed a flashlight and ran to her room. She was asleep. Nobody was there. I checked every room, every closet, every door. Nothing. When I returned to my bedroom, the monitor crackled again. The same voice. This time it said my daughter's name. I nearly dropped the monitor. Police came and searched the house, but found no intruder. The next day, an officer asked to see the monitor. After a few minutes, he figured out what happened. Someone had hacked into the device. A stranger had been watching and talking through it. The account was traced to another state. They never identified who it was. We threw the monitor away that same day. The part that still keeps me awake isn't the voice. It's that when I ran into my daughter's room, she smiled in her sleep, like she recognized whoever was speaking to her.